and Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist were outraged by the disenfranchisement of voters in Detroit by not having those precincts be recountable. Fast forward to the general election. When we met to certify the results, the meeting started at 3 o'clock, and at that time we did not have a written report of what the vote totals were. It was well after 3 o'clock before we received a 77-page report with the vote totals. We were not provided with a written copy of the executive summary that gives you a plus-minus report per precinct, so you can understand which precincts are in balance, which precincts are out of balance, and which precincts are out of balance unexplained. The key here is the unexplained precincts. I asked for a written copy of that report before we began the meeting. I was told it wasn't available at the time. Wayne County Director of Elections, Greg Marr, provided a staff report, and in that staff report, he gave us the executive summary verbally. If you were watching the Zoom call or in the meeting, you saw us frantically trying to write down the numbers of the precincts for the different communities in Wayne County and within Detroit. I did the math while I was sitting there, and it appeared that 70% of the Detroit absentee counting boards were out of balance unexplained. We have a repeat of the primary. The job of a canvasser is to make sure that you understand the differences between the number of ballots that are validly issued and received and the number of votes totaled. If there is a difference, you need to have an explanation. That is the job of the canvass. That did not occur in the 2 weeks that we had to canvass. That is why I voted no for the certification. Not just for Detroit, not to take votes away from anyone. It was to give the state the additional 10 days to do their investigation to get the answers to why the balances didn't match. Immediately upon voting no, my other board members made statements and immediately brought in the words racism and partisanship. My intent with my no vote was to make sure that we got the answers so that the voters of Detroit can have recountable precincts. It has nothing to do with black or white. After commentary from my board members and legal counsel informing me that I didn't have discretion to vote no when I believe the documentation was not complete and accurate. My question is, if a board of canvasser doesn't have discretion to vote yes or no, why is there even a board of canvassers? We continued on with public comment. I endured about 2 hours worth of commentary, most of it calling me a racist, some of them getting personal and bringing my daughter into the situation and announcing to the world what city I live in and what school my daughter attends. During that public commentary, Vice Chair Kinloch pulled me into the back of the warehouse and offered me a compromise. He said he'd been on the phone with Democrats all throughout the state trying to find a solution to help certify the results in Wayne County. He assured me that he had confirmation from Governor Whitmer that they would be able to get an independent audit done to clarify the precincts that were unexplained in their differences. I asked him to draft up a motion because there were a few complications in exactly how we were going to describe an independent audit, independent comprehensive audit to answer those questions. A softball audit of basically redoing the canvas may not catch it. It needs to be comprehensive. We went back out to the tables in the public. Vice Chair Kinloch met with the rest of the board members individually as to not cross any lines with the Open Meetings Act, and we came back, reconvened, and had a vote. Unfortunately, at that time, the Zoom conference on the laptop had been muted, and the public that was watching online was not able to hear the commentary with that motion being made. I saw an opportunity with that motion that Vice Chair Kinloch made to get to the bottom of the unexplained precincts. A comprehensive audit would attain the job that the canvass needs to do, and that is why I decided to vote yes on that motion. When that motion was passed, at the later point in the evening, we wrapped up the meeting shortly thereafter. With the amount of angry comments and threats that were coming in, I ended up leaving for my safety. I want it to be clear that the documentation, the signatures on the final statement of votes that were voted to be certified, I did not physically sign. If there is a signature on that document, it was my signature stamp used without my approval. I do not have a copy of that document at this time to confirm if they put the signature stamp on it or not. It was brought to my attention that minutes after we took the vote, Secretary Benson was on TV saying that anything that we did in the motion was non-binding and that she wasn't agreeing to it. I made a good faith effort in that compromise with Vice Chair Kinloch and was misled. Right now, the State Board of Canvassers has the issue at their hands. I have provided them with a copy of my affidavit rescinding my vote. That motion to certify was contingent upon the comprehensive audit that needs to be done before there is a certification by the state. An audit after the fact is not going to answer those unexplained precincts, and they still will not be recountable. Another point that I want to make is that this is not about the presidential election. Most often the recounts are going to come for local candidates, city councils, school boards, mayors. When you're in a local community and you file for a recount and you walk in and half of the precincts can't be recounted because there's no answer as to why they don't match, that candidate and all the voters in that local district are disenfranchised. And with that, I guess we can start taking questions.
If it wasn't about the presidential election, why did you take a call from the president, and when did you talk to him in that process?
I am going to answer this question once.
What was the question? I'm sorry, we can't hear back here.
He asked what the call from the president was about and what time it came.
You mentioned this wasn't about a presidential election yet. In the process of this, you took a call from the president. Would love to know when it came. Was it between votes? Was it after your decision to reverse your vote? Can you clarify and what that discussion was about?
Sure. I was walked to my car with member William Hartman. And as I approached my car, I received a phone call and said, "Will you accept a call from the president?" And I said yes. I got in my car because it was cold. Member Hartman joined me. I received a call from the president. It was after the meeting, and he thanked me for my service, asked me how I was doing. There was a genuine concern for my safety with what he had heard, the threats that were coming in.
So he was monitoring this apparently, and it was right after the meeting that you spoke with him?
No, it was later in the evening. It was as I was walking out. There was some time after the meeting that I was in the room, and my husband called and told me to get home. He was fearful for my safety. So I was waiting around to sign paperwork and left.
Are you saying the president's call had no influence on you recanting your vote?
Absolutely.
Did the president have any influence regarding your affidavit? Did he tell you or ask you to do that?
No, not at all. The call was genuinely for my safety.
Do you believe that your affidavit is binding and that therefore the canvas is not binding?
I'm not an attorney. That sounds more like a legal question, and I can get you contact for my attorney if you'd like to ask him.
When the president referred to your service, did he mean that night or in general? Can you be more specific?
My
How specific did he get?
he didn't. Thank you for your service as a canvasser. Right? It's mostly a volunteer position. Prior to this election, not many people knew what a canvass was. Most people thought you had an election and it was done. A lot of people don't understand the process or the work that goes into it. And so as being providing a public service, I appreciated his appreciation for it.
And was there any reference to your vote that night or anything
No.
that you had said on the record?
No.
So just thank you for your service. Next topic.
That was the end of the call. Thank you
Did
for
you
your
get-
service. Glad you're safe. Have a good night.
Did you get any calls or texts or emails from anyone else before the meeting suggesting how you should vote or asking how you should vote? Any Republicans, Democrats, neighbors, anybody?
2 days prior to the certification vote, my phone number must have been released or published to a couple of groups. I received phone calls from both the left and the right asking me to vote yes and no. When you're canvassing, it's not a personal decision of yes or no. It is, do you have complete, accurate documentation that every valid vote was counted and every invalid vote wasn't counted? You balance the number of ballots to the number of votes tallied. And you have to have an explanation for what the difference is. We didn't have explanations for several precincts.
How many votes are we talking about? Any idea in those 70-odd precincts?
I believe, and again, if I would have had the written executive summary prior to the meeting, I could have analyzed it better and had that information for you. I still don't have a copy of the written executive summary. I have the verbal from the meeting. I believe Director Marr said the highest out-of-balance precinct unexplained was 34 votes.
Mayor Duggan this week said the total cumulatively was less than 400. Given the spread of the margin of this election in Wayne County, why now? Everybody agrees that the unbalanced precincts is an issue. Why did you pick this time, this moment, to not certify in a presidential election with overwhelming results, especially following what happened in August, when you're talking 400 votes out of over 300,000?
And I'm going to go back to the primary where it was a huge problem. And we certified with the good faith that it was going to have an investigation and be fixed. We're now here. It obviously wasn't fixed. And yes, it may be a cumulative of 400 votes. But tell that to a city councilman in Livonia or whatever race they have in Livonia that's very close. If half of those precincts can't be recounted, doesn't that matter for him? Doesn't every vote count? So when you tell me it's only 400, I say those 400 people deserve to have their vote matter.
Ms. Palmer, how long have you served on the Board of Canvassers?
About 2 years.
And so how many elections have you done before this particular year?
I did not do the math.
I mean, these in general were not before 2020?
My understanding is that it's an ongoing problem in Wayne County for many years, and it's just kind of, that's the way it is. That doesn't make it right.
Somebody at the county told me you were appointed in May, so you were appointed 2 years ago as a canvasser? I'm asking.
I'm like, roughly,
Okay.
roughly
So
2 years.
Roughly, but you were appointed 2 years ago.
I was appointed, yes, this is an appointed position. There was someone had to leave the term early, and I was appointed for the term.
Was Hartman appointed at the same time or different?
No, Hartman was on the board to fill the opening. And to further clarify, there's 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats on the board. Each county, the Republican and the Democrat, when they're filling their seats, they send recommendations to the county commission, and the county commission selects from those recommendations for the appointment.
Ms.
And
Palmer, you're a member of the
to step down, would you? There have been calls for you to step down, will you?
No.
Can you come
There's
back
no
to the
reason to.
microphones a little, please? Is it possible? Thank you.
Ms. Palmer, you're a member of the Michigan 14th Congressional District Republican Committee. And
Yes.
this week, that committee circulated a draft resolution urging the state legislature to appoint a slate of electors that would support the re-election of Donald Trump. Were you involved in the drafting of that resolution, and do you support it?
I received an email that they were going to have a meeting regarding that, and I emailed the entire committee back and let them know with my position on the Board of Canvassers that I could not be involved.
Do
Could you make a
support it?
copy of that available to us through John Barlow or whomever, or through Mr. Schwartz?
I will look into that, yes.
If you have to redact email addresses, we understand, but it'd be good to
Ms.
have
Palmer,
that.
what would you like to see happen now? Where do you want to go from here? If you could talk to the microphone, please.
At this point, my job is done as a Board of Canvasser for this election. It is up to the State Board of Canvassers at this point. What would I like to see? I'd like to see some change so that processes, equipment, whatever it takes to get the clerks what they need to get these election results documented properly on election night. That's what I want to see happen. The county staff going through the canvass worked multiple hours. They did more work with this election, this canvass, than they have in any prior before, working 18 hours a night. They shouldn't have to work that hard to find the answers of why A doesn't match B. We need to start at the first step of the process and get it better there, and make sure that when it comes to the canvass, we can explain all those. And if we can't, you bring the clerk and the election inspectors in, you ask the questions until you get the answers.
So the Secretary of State's office saying this is a done deal. There's no decertifying the election results. You're not contesting that.
I don't know the legalities of that at this point. I'm going to defer to my legal team for that.
Do you expect to be a plaintiff in any action that happens to try and stop this certification?
I have no knowledge of. I have not been watching the lawsuits. My focus has been on Wayne County. Do we have explanations for the out of balance or not? Nobody's asked me. I don't know.
But you personally don't intend to sue as the chairwoman or as an
No.
individual or as a
No.
constituent? Okay.
With all due respect, if somebody in opposition to what you're saying, flatly, it's obviously very polarized, looks at the sequence of events 2 weeks ago, Ms. Romney leveling allegations that factually turned out to be not true, court cases that have been retracted or lost, Mr. Chatfield, Mr. Shirkey in Washington now, you getting a call from the president, yet you say none of that, you're not involved or in sequence with any of that. I mean, can you reiterate in regard to the fact that many may just not believe what you're saying, with all due respect to you?
And that's fine. I know what I'm doing and what's in my heart. I could not, in good conscience, certify numbers that I know there's no answers to. That is the point of the canvass. I challenge you. Look at the canvass in the rest of the counties across Michigan. Find out how many they have out of balance, unexplained. Take a look at that, and then come back and ask me what my real intention is for Wayne County canvass.
Kent and Ingham County clerks yesterday said 10%, to your point, versus 70 for Detroit. So yes, what you're saying is accurate with that.
And let's look at the quantities. Ingham County, their largest difference unexplained was 4 votes, not 34.
Ms. Palmer, do you think it's possible to explain some of those things? I mean, where do you get those answers? How do you find out what happened when everybody's gone home?
Yeah, well, I'd love to give you an example of that. If you have 100 ballots that are issued and someone spoils one of those ballots, you're going to have 100 ballots issued and only 99 counted because one of them is spoiled. The election inspectors are required to document that in the poll book. 1 spoiled ballot. There's the numbers don't match, but there's your explanation. You're saying, how do you fix it if after the fact you go back? Well, there's a chairperson for that precinct. That chairperson is responsible for making sure things are balanced at the end of the evening before they seal up those boxes. It should be done at the event. And I understand it was a huge election, it was long hours, but we've got to get back to what needs to be done and not just say it's okay.
It looks like human error, not fraud then, with the discrepancies?
I can't answer that.
Ms. Palmer, media reports were saying that at the Board of Canvassers meeting, you suggested that all the other townships and cities in the county besides Detroit be certified. Is that possible, and why did you feel that way?
in that meeting, I'm going to go back to not having the written executive report, the written executive summary. If I had had that in advance, I could have went through and highlighted all of the communities in Wayne County that had the unexplained precincts. At the time, I didn't. And Detroit is repeating with the absentees the problem with the unbalanced, unexplained. I started there, and 2 sentences later brought in, and Livonia too, because Livonia had a problem as well. I was speaking off the cuff after being attacked by my board members for being racist and trying to come to a compromise to find out, can I get these guys to certify what is in balance, what is in balance with explanation? Let's certify everything we know is good, and then have a discussion about how do we get to fixing what's not. They wouldn't let me get there because they were too busy coming after me at that point.
Have you filed any police complaints or any PPOs?
Yes.
Who have you filed them with?
Grosse Pointe Woods Police and the FBI.
And what's the substance of the complaints?
Doxing, physical threats.
Anybody named in any of them? Any
My
individuals?
daughter and my husband,
No,
along with myself.
No, I mean, any individuals on the threatening end. Anyone? Have you named anyone who's threatening you?
Yes, and I'm just gonna leave it there.
Do you fear for your safety at this point?
I fear for my daughter's safety a lot. Most of these insults and hurled statements and threats are regarding my daughter. How many local boards do you see, if there's a disagreement, the first conversation comes out of their mouth is racist and attacking each other instead of having a civil discussion? We need to bring civility back to civic engagement. Not only has my home and my family been threatened, my employer has been threatened. There are businesses that I shared a tweet months ago for a giveaway for a wedding dress. That bridal shop is being harassed and threatened at this point. Where does it end?
Ms. Palm, when you talk about being intimidated and being threatened, there are people in Grosse Pointe who feel that you've been responsible for intimidation and threats through taxpayers for Grosse Pointe and in the school board elections. So they see some irony here, but they feel you've been bullying them and now you're crying victim here. Can you speak to that?
The advertisements for taxpayers for Grosse Pointe schools included facts about school operations. They were not intimidating or harassing anyone.
Well, there's also an allegation that you're involved in a recall campaign for some of these school board members that didn't even bother to collect petition signatures. The implication being that you were threatening a recall, but you weren't really serious about it.
I did file a recall for 2 school board members. Our intent was to begin signature collecting as soon as the certification was done because my hands were full with the canvas. And now that we have additional COVID restrictions, those are going to be put on hold. I can't go gather signatures with COVID as high as it is right now. We were planning on issuing a press release for that, but this popped up first.
So when you say the canvassing, you mean the November canvassing, not the August?
Correct.
Okay.
You mentioned civility needs to come back. What a lot of people have seen from the White House is anything but civility throughout the election process. How can there be civility at this level when from the highest point in government there appears to be none?
I take responsibility for my actions. I can't take responsibility for anybody else's.
Can you share a thought in regard to the anecdotal testimony that came up in your meeting the other night as well as throughout about Republican harassment of poll watchers and vote takers and counters, and basically coming from outstate into TCF trying to allegedly impede the process? Could that have attributed to the discrepancies you're talking about?
I'm not going to comment on that one.
Why not?
Just one more question, please, after this.
Why would you not comment on that? It seems directly relevant to what you're alleging.
I was there for 26 hours straight at TCF Center. I saw it with my own eyes. It was coming from both directions. And I will leave it there.
Ms.
Just
Palmer,
one more question, please.
Are there any circumstances under which you would accept that a discrepancy can't be explained? I mean, is there an acceptable tolerance where you're like, well, we got to 99%, let's go?
I can't give you the exact number.
Sure, but-
There's no spot in the statute that says you're allowed to have 3% of 3 over, but Ingham County had their highest number off was 4. Right? That seems reasonable. That seems like it might be a clerical error. When you get into the larger numbers of 34, I think in the primary we had one that was like 76 off. You need to dig deeper. It's not okay to just say, oh, well, we can't figure it out.
So you're not looking for a perfect.
You can't. It's
Okay,
no.
so
Yeah.
to use John's example, you'd take 10% over 70%.
Absolutely. Yeah.
50%?
I was hoping to see an improvement from the primary for sure.
But that's worth putting the brakes on a presidential election in this climate.
We weren't. I'll answer this one and we can be done. We didn't certify, and when that happens, it goes to the county and they have 10 additional days. We did not throw away any votes. We did not nullify any votes. We did not stop any votes. The process continues. We gave the state the additional time to ask some more questions to come up with those explanations.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time and have a nice Thanksgiving, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Palmer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Palmer. I appreciate your time.